there! Welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Van, and I like to customize dolls on this channel. This week I am going to be doing yet another collab. I am working with Shelby.K.G, Stitchwyck, The Witch Crafting, Nelumbo, and Summoning Dragon. We decided to get together and make you a Halloween-themed masquerade ball. We all chose different Generation 3 dolls, and I decided to use Spectra as my base. So let's go ahead and get into it. So to start with this custom, I'm actually going to cut her eyes out. So the reason I am cutting out her eyes is I want to use her face as a mask later in the video. So I do need to turn her face into a mask. Now, when you are cutting the eyes out or the face off of a doll, it is always best practice to use the sharpest knife that you do have, wear safety protection, and make sure that the face isn't too warm. When the vinyl is really warm, it's soft and squishy and more pliable, which causes the knife to be able to ricochet easier. If it's a little harder or colder, it is easier to kind of stab in, kind of like when you're cutting a tomato. If you're cutting a really soft and juicy tomato, it's going to just get everywhere. So just try to be careful. Here I am using the X-Acto blade at an angle to kind of cut behind her eye, and that's so when I finally do cut off the rest of the eye, we do have a flat surface on the back. So the reason I ended up choosing Spectra out of all the G3 dolls is she is one of the newer ones, and I've actually always liked Spectra. I mean, she is a little problematic, but isn't all of our favorites problematic in some way, shape, or form? So once you are done removing her eyes, you're going to go ahead and mark around her face to kind of see where you want the edge of her mask to be. I wanted to have her mask be kind of a heart shape, so I made sure to draw all of it around. If you want more of a circle shape, you can go ahead and cut it any way you want. I'm actually going to be sculpting her a new face, so I am using this same doll to finish the entire process. I'm not going to give this face to another one. So yeah, go ahead, cut it off. Now, once you are done cutting off, it is best to kind of remove all the extra little stuff from the inside, as well as the stuff inside of the doll's actual head. Now that we have the mask that we kind of want, I am going to use a Dremel tool to kind of smooth out all of the edges. You could just use hand tools to achieve this, but using a Dremel is so much faster and so much easier. Why did nobody tell me this was a thing you could do until recently? I wish I had known this on like 5 different dolls I've made. Once you are done removing the eyes and the excess, we are going to actually use acetone to wipe off the remainder of the face. Has anyone else noticed that G3 faces are a little harder to wipe off than Gen 1? It's kind of annoying, but also it's kind of nice because it means their faces are a little more sturdy, and I do have them just as a collectible. Okay, so now that her face makeup is all removed except for her lips, this is what her face looks like, and we are going to move on to sculpting her actual face. So I did use some Apoxie Sculpt to just fill in her face roughly before the sculpting process. This is a 2-part medium. You mix part A and part B in equal parts to create a putty that hardens over time. It is a chemical reaction, so no heat is required. It is best practice to use gloves, but they always stick to gloves, and I hate the feeling so much that I'm just not going to follow the directions. So after mixing up a new clump, I'm going to go ahead and smush it onto her face. This is going to become her new face. So I put in some indents where her eyes are going to be, shaped out a nose shape, and kind of indented where her lips are going to be. In the background, you can see that I added stuff to the mask. This does not stay on the final version because I absolutely hated how it turned out. Now with her face roughly pressed in, I am going to take an X-Acto blade and carve out her mouth. I want to give her a creepy kind of smile. The entire process I was making this, my friend kept referring to her as Spectra fingers, like salad fingers. If you know what that is, leave a comment down below. So many people don't know what that is, and that was my childhood. So we are going to use the X-Acto blade to kind of carve it out, and I am using some clay sculpting tools to kind of push her mouth in a little further. If you do decide to use clay sculpting tools on Apoxie Sculpt, just make sure to really clean them when you're done, because if you don't, this Apoxie Sculpt hardens and never comes off. You can actually see some of the residue on both of these because I am not the best at cleaning up my utensils when I'm done using them. So to make sure the inside of her mouth is smooth, I am kind of making it wider than I want it to be, and I'm going to push it down a little bit later. To make her eyes, I am using a large ball tool and a small ball tool. These are to kind of rough in the shape of what her eye socket should be, as well as the holes where her eyes are going to live later. It isn't too hard to do this part. This is kind of the most fun part, to put the little eye holes on, but making it symmetrical is always important. Now, once you are done with the rough pass, you do want to kind of smooth it over with some water. It's going to make sure that it has the smoothest texture possible, because sanding Apoxie Sculpt is a nightmare and it's not very fun to sand. So always do this step to make your sanding so much less work in the end. And that's the rough pass of her face. Now we are going to wait 24 hours and we are going to do a second pass of Apoxie Sculpt on her face. I was originally going to give her teeth, but I didn't make her mouth hole deep enough. In the end, I like it better. I'm kind of glad she doesn't have teeth. But to kind of give her a more defined mouth, I am going to put some more Apoxie Sculpt in that hole just so I can smooth it out a little better. I'm using the same clay tools as last time, just pushing stuff in and then using my fingers to kind of smush out the edges into the remainder of the clay. She looks so happy. She's not going to stay looking that happy. So I am using a smaller ball stylus tool, the teeniest, tiniest one that I have, to help me kind of clean up the edges of her mouth, smush in her detail a little bit more, and I am using it to scrape off the extra Apoxie Sculpt from the dried Apoxie Sculpt. Once I do finish the face, I am going to make 2 little balls for her eyes. These are just kind of to make her eyes look a little bit more 3D. This is a trick I picked up from Ace of Clay, great sculptor here on YouTube. So I am using these tiny little balls, going to put them in, and then I'm going to use my smallest dotting tool to put the little pupils in the eyes. And now that she has pupils, I think she's a lot cuter and a little less creepy, but she's still a little creepy. Now, to blend the edge between the vinyl of the head and the Apoxie Sculpt that we have added, there are a few different ways to do this. One of the ways is to completely disguise the edge, put a snake of clay around it, smush it in completely, and smooth it on both ends. I decided to take a fun approach, which is a little easier, and make it look like her skin was peeling back. So I am just smoothing down one of the edges, the outside edge, into the epoxy, and then I'm going to flatten the inner edge a little bit, but also lift it up and add texture to make it look like kind of like skin is peeling and bubbling. This is actually a very easy process. You just take one of your styling tools, push it underneath the clay to lift it up, and then push it back down. This kind of gives it a ripple effect. And that's what her face looks like. And now it is time to get painting. I went ahead and spray painted her face off camera. It's so much easier to spray paint a flat white than it is to paint it, because white takes forever to build up, so I may have cheated a little bit, but it was much easier. Now we are going to do her face completely in black and white, so there is going to be no color except for her cheeks, but we are using this light gray to kind of add dimension in her eye sockets as well as around her face. And then I am taking a dried brush to kind of dry brush around to blend them together, and then I am adding a little bit white on top to kind of mix it more together. This process does take a pretty long time, so I did cut a lot of it out. It's just a lot of back and forth with the dark colors and the light colors to get a balance that you do like. Once you do get a balance that you do like, I took some black and I blackened up the area around her eyes to make them even darker. I didn't like how this looked in the end, so I actually ended up whitening it again. So a lot of back and forth here just to get her the perfect raccoon eyes. Now, as you can see, I did end up not giving her an actual nose. I felt like it added to the creepy effect to have a full smile and no nose. But if you want to sculpt a nose, that's totally up to you. So once I have added more white, I'm going to add even more dark black into her eyes to kind of add to the effect. I am going to blend this out with more dry brushing. So dry brushing is when you take your brush, you dip it in the paint that you want, you wipe off as much paint as possible, and then you brush it over the surface. This helps either blend or bring out the finer details. Now that we are done with kind of the blending, I am going to start painting in her eye. I am taking a jet black to paint solely around her iris. Not her iris, around her sclera. And then I'm also using this tiny brush to kind of give her little itty bitty bags under her eyes. Because what's more high fashion than designer bags, even if those designer bags are the bags under your eyes? Once I have completed one of her eyes, I am just going to copy it onto the second one. And this paintbrush that I'm using is actually a pretty cheap paintbrush from Michaels that I cut 99% of the hair off of. Once you do finish kind of getting these lines in, you can just leave them the way that they are, like I am, or you can blend them out more to give it more of a subtle effect. I wanted her to look slightly cartoony, because all of the Monster High dolls look cartoony anyway. Once we are done with that, I am going to fill in her lips. Lips? She doesn't have lips. I'm going to fill in her open mouth with the same black color. This black is slightly shiny, so it does add a little bit of depth to her face because the rest of the paint that I used is matte acrylics. But if you want it to look all the same or want it to blend easier, straight, flat, matte acrylic is much easier to blend than gloss. Now during this part, it is very important that you don't paint outside of the mouth cavity because covering black with white is so much harder than covering white with black. So be as careful as possible. All of the footage in this is sped up about 4 to 5 times faster than I actually paint. I am very slow. I had 3.5 hours of footage that has been condensed into this, so take your time, there's no rush. Now, once we are done with all the black details, I'm going to go ahead and paint her scleras. I am just doing basic flat white matte acrylic. I am building this up way thicker than you're supposed to. And then I am adding in her pupils with a little bit of black acrylic. And then I am using some pink and red to give her some blush because she got to be cute. You can't be on my channel and not be cute. That's the rule. So we're going to blush in some of her cheeks, which kind of makes her look like the puppet in Saw. And to paint this, I am using the same dry brushing technique, putting on the red on my paintbrush, wiping off as much as possible, and this is how her face turned out. I think she turned out super cute. Now we are going to work on this mask. Now again, I did take off all of the sculpting I did on that you saw previously. I didn't like how it turned out. I wanted her to have a more elegant mask, and it ended up making her look like a peacock. That's all I could get from it, and I did not like it. So I'm going to use some pencil here just to rough in the face that I do want to give her. If you are spraying Mr. Super Clear, it is kind of a best practice to avoid graphite because it doesn't always interact the best, but I'm just using acrylic paint. I'm not using any sealant on this project. So with your finest brush and watered down black acrylic, go ahead and paint the eye lines. This is much harder than it looks. I wish I was better at it, but I need more practice. I ended up not liking these eyelashes, so I actually did wipe off the top eyelashes later. I did love how the bottom ones came out, so I did keep them. And almost all of my dolls have a fierce winged liner, so she's gonna get it too. The one nice thing about dolls with eye holes instead of painted on eyes is you get to actually paint the inside black to get a kind of more realistic eyeliner look. Yeah. So here I am using a shiny purple acrylic to kind of paint in her lips. I am using my fingernail as a paint palette. There's a paint palette right in front of me. I don't know why I decided to do this. I really could have just put it on the paint palette, but I guess my finger works in an emergency, even though it wasn't one. Also, please ignore my lovely head that keeps popping in. I'm doing a new filming setup that I haven't used yet, and I'm not sure where the camera is exactly, so I keep walking into it. So this is where I decide I didn't like the eyelashes. I went ahead and wiped them off. You can just use water to wipe them off. I did use a little bit of acetone because it was a few hours later that I realized I didn't like them. And for this, I am just painting on really bushy eyelashes. I want her to look like she's wearing like 5 pairs of eyelashes, but I didn't want to glue them on, so I painted them. Now, once the basic makeup of your mask is done, you can go ahead and add anything you want to it. I decided to embellish it with some eyebrows, some little decals and stuff, which you'll see in just a moment. Eyebrows are one of the most annoying things to paint, but that is the best eyebrow I have ever painted on a first try in my life. I did not have to wipe it off, and that is a first for me. This second one took about 10 tries to match, and it still's not perfect, but it's good enough. One way you can get even eyebrows is to add dots like I did there. The only thing is you do have to wipe off the dots usually, but I just use them as an aesthetic choice on this doll. And I am using the same purple that her lips are to paint her eyebrows, as well as the random face marking. And I am using a silver alcohol ink to add some final details, like some hearts, some little lines. I thought that having little hearts in the tear duct area would look really cute on this mask and kind of draw your face in. And then the little lines that I put above the eye is just because I like adding eye lines to all of my dolls, and I didn't on her, and she didn't feel complete without it. And with that, the mask is done. I do add a few more embellishments off camera, but this is the basic mask that I did make. And I really like it. I like how it turned out. I think it's really pretty, and I think it goes really well with her face sculpt. Now we are going to make the clothes. I am just going to breeze through how to make the clothes because it took me way too many tries to get the clothes looking right here. So this is just a quick rendition. I'm just using a basic pattern from Rad Doll Designs. She changed her name recently. I believe that's her name, but it will be down in the description. I am just using the mermaid dress pattern that she does have on her site, and I'm using stretchy spandex as well as some tulle, some chiffon, and some sparkle mesh. And this is the basic dress. I am going to use that same pink to kind of create a wraparound, and then I'm going to add some additional embellishments off camera. And with that, let's take a look at how she turns out. She's done. I love how she turned out so much. Her spooky face, her little mask, all the little chain details, the dress, which by the way, the dress was the 3rd version I made of this outfit. I did save version number 1. It is going to go in a later project, so stay tuned if you want to see that. And her face is completely inspired by Ace of Clay. If you do like spooky, ooky things, I am going to have him linked down below. Love his channel. check him out. He's great. And don't forget to watch my other collaborators. I'm going to have a playlist up here. It's going to have all our videos in it. I've seen the final product of all of their videos and they look absolutely amazing, and I'm so excited to see the process of how they got there. So go ahead, check them out. That's what I'm about to do. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching. Again, as a reminder, if you liked it, like it. If you loved it, sub it. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye. I'm so mean and angry. Ball. I spit. And we're done. Let me out of here.